Welcome back to The Explainer. So today, we're taking a hard look at the modern cultural narrative that optimizing for achievement, wealth, and status is the guaranteed roadmap to a happy life. We are constantly told that grinding harder and climbing higher is the answer, right? But the actual data tells a vastly different story.
What if everything you've been taught about building a good life is not just slightly off, but actually completely backwards? Well, to answer that, we're diving into literally the longest study on human happiness ever conducted. And what they found contradicts almost everything our culture teaches us to chase. It completely reshapes how we should be spending our time.
Think about this timeline for a second. Back in 1938, Harvard researchers started something that honestly shouldn't have even been possible. They recruited a group of college sophomores and began tracking their lives, not for a few months or a few years, but for decades. Multiple generations of scientists dedicated their lives to this project. They tracked these people from their teenage years straight through to their passing. They interviewed their families, drew their blood, scanned their brains, and they watched careers rise and marriages fall.
85 years. That is how long this has been running. Most research projects struggle to keep participants for a few weeks because, people move or they just lose interest, but this one kept going. Researchers had access to every piece of data you could possibly imagine over those 8.5 decades. Genetics, IQ scores, income levels, physical health markers, the whole shebang. They ran all these numbers to find the single strongest predictor of a healthy, happy, and long life. And here is the absolute game changer. When they controlled for all those variables, relationship quality eclipsed absolutely everything else. Just let that land for a moment. The people who invested in their connections, who really prioritized their marriages, their friendships, their family bonds, they were the ones who thrived. They lived longer, they stayed healthier, and they reported higher happiness across every single stage of life. On the flip side, the folks who optimized for achievement at the expense of their relationships, even those who reached the very top of their fields and accumulated massive wealth, often ended up feeling hollow. And this impact wasn't just psychological.
Section 1. The Biology of Loneliness.
Now, you might be thinking this is all just about feeling warm and fuzzy, but when we transition from psychology to hard biology, the data is staggering. Researchers naturally assumed biological factors like genetics or standard lab work would dominate long-term health outcomes, but the data kept pointing right back to relationships. Get this, your relationship satisfaction at age 50 actually predicts your health at age 80 better than your cholesterol levels do. We spend so much energy measuring and medicating biological markers, but how connected you feel in midlife actually matters more for your physical flourishing. No way, right? But it's true.
When you look at the real danger of isolation, the comparison is shocking. Loneliness doesn't just feel bad, it literally kills. The mortality risk of chronic loneliness is roughly equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and it rivals alcoholism in its impact on your health and lifespan. Think about that. We have warning labels, massive public health campaigns, and social stigmas for smoking, but we tend to treat loneliness as just a mood, a phase, or maybe a quirky personality trait.
But your biology doesn't care what we call it. Chronic disconnection destroys the body. It floods your system with the stress hormone cortisol, triggers high inflammation, and completely suppresses your immune function. The loneliest participants in the study even showed accelerated cognitive decline. Basically, their bodies broke down faster and their minds followed. It makes a massive case that loneliness isn't just a personal quirk, it's a severe public health crisis.
Section 2. The Ultimate Regret Test.
To really ground all this biological data in deeply human terms, the researchers pivoted to the emotional reflections of the participants once they hit their 80s. And when asked what they regretted most, the answers were remarkably consistent. The ultimate remorse always centered around neglected relationships. It was a chorus of, "I wish I'd stayed in touch. I wish I'd spent more time with my kids. I wish I hadn't let that friendship drift. And I wish I'd been more present with my spouse."
And this reinforces a massive paradigm shift. Nobody wished they had worked more. Nobody wished they had made more money, climbed higher up the corporate ladder, or achieved greater status. Literally not one person at the end of the study said they wished they'd spent more time at the office. These were people at the very end of their lives, looking back and realizing they had just invested in the wrong things.
Now look, this data isn't here to guilt trip you. It's about pattern recognition. Think of this as regret minimization. If you could interview your 80-year-old self right now, what would they tell you to prioritize? The data gives us an early warning, a sneak peek at the regrets you just haven't earned yet. It forces us to look at our current life trajectory and ask, what choices today would my future self actually thank me for?
Section 3. Building your social fitness.
So, how do we actually apply this and fix our trajectories?
Well, it starts with a really relatable analogy. Think about physical fitness. You don't just go to the gym once, do a few push-ups, and declare yourself fit forever, right? Fitness is a practice that requires consistent effort. Social fitness works the exact same way. Relationships aren't some destination you reach, they're a condition you maintain through ongoing investment. We happily schedule workouts and track progress for our bodies, but we often treat friendships like static achievements. We check the box, move on, and then wonder why those friendships fade away. Social fitness means treating relationships as essential infrastructure that requires regular maintenance.
If we look at well-being research, it points to 5 core dimensions. But notice how relationships sit right at the very center. They influence all the others. When your connections are strong, everything else, your positive emotions, your sense of meaning, your accomplishments, it all just gets easier. When they're weak, everything else suffers. You wouldn't skip the gym for 5 years and expect to be strong, so we can't skip out on our friends for months and expect to feel connected.
Section 4. The Wiser Framework.
To build this into an actionable, daily practice, the researchers developed what they call the Wiser Framework. It's basically a 5-step masterclass for emotional intelligence in your everyday interactions. First, watch. Actually pay attention to your emotional experiences instead of just sleepwalking through them. Notice when you feel connected or isolated. Next, interpret. When emotions pop up, try to interpret them without judgment. Feeling lonely doesn't mean you're broken. The goal here is understanding. Third, select. Remember, you have agency. Choose a helpful response, like reaching out instead of withdrawing. Choose vulnerability over protection. Fourth, engage. And do it fully. Being physically there while mentally scrolling on your phone doesn't register as connection. Actual presence matters. Finally, reflect. Look back on what worked and what didn't so you can continuously improve. The study participants who really flourished treated relationships as something worth getting better at.
85 years of data make one thing perfectly clear. A good life is built on good relationships. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final vital thought, something to act on right now. Think about the people in your life. Think about your own social fitness and ask yourself, what relationships are you letting slide right now that your 80-year-old self will wish you hadn't?